welcome to Oulton Park in Cheshire for a weekend of historic racing. Now this event celebrates the famous Gold Cup, which in its heyday of the 50s, 60s and 70s here at Oulton was one of the most prominent dates on the calendar. The winners are like a who's who: Clark, Surtees and Moss. And in particular this weekend, Oulton welcomes back one of its greatest, Sir Jack Brabham, who won this event, the Gold Cup, 4 times, and his cars have won it 5 times.
He's a natural driver, he's a brilliant engineer.
He was known even in the 60s as a wily old fox.
He was my hero, obviously, one of the great heroes.
Well, he never ever sought the limelight like other drivers did.
I can remember coming to the Oulton Park circuit and loved it. It was a fantastic circuit to drive on. Well, it was a challenge, I think, really. You know, all racing drivers like to have a challenge, and to really go quick round here was a bit of a challenge. You know, you could drive around it fine, but to get those last few tenths was pretty difficult to do.
Oulton Park has a fascinating history. In the Second World War, General Patton was based here with the American Army, and believe it or not, Joe Louis actually fought here in a few demonstration fights. The corners themselves, since the circuit began in 1953, also have an interesting history. Old Hall is named after the site of Oulton Hall, and just behind me, Lodge. The last corner is also aptly named because of the lodge there. Out of Lodge, the circuit dips away through Deer Leap, recalling the days of the Deer Park at Oulton Hall. Once the avenue was lined with trees. The waterfall, like cascades, now turns left where originally the circuit bore right towards Clay Hill. That later loop ends with Knicker Brook, named after Blaster Bates, had disturbed a courting couple while dynamiting the route for that section of the new track. The full circuit was in use by the time Jack Brabham was racing cars he'd built himself. In the race for pre-66 Grand Prix cars, 4 of his Brabhams took on the best from Lotus, Cooper and Lola. So let's join Martin Haven for the race.
Thank you, Jonathan. On pole position, Frank Sittner in a Brabham BT4, a model he reckons was a great advance in car design.
It's probably the nicest car I have ever driven. It's the most precise, it's a precision instrument. Prior to this, obviously, if you take the Cooper T53, which is the sort of forerunner of this car, that's a car where you would see pictures of Jack Brabham driving on opposite lock, tail out, full opposite lock. I've driven a T53, and you're against the stops on opposite lock. This is a couple of years later. You drive this, and yes, there is opposite lock, but there's nothing like the same amount. So in other words, it's a much more of a precise drive. It's lower, it's tauter, it's lighter, it's smaller, and it's a lot quicker.
Alongside Frank in another BT4, Richard Atwood. He remembers driving for Lotus and BRM, racing against Brabham in his Grand Prix heyday.
You could tell he started racing on loose stuff in Australia, because he always dirt tracked the car out of corners, and if there was an edge there he would go over it, and with the intention, I think, a little bit of flying the odd stone past your ear if you were following him too closely. So, but he was canny. They called him the wily old fox, and he still is, I'm sure.
So 3 Brabhams at the front, a Lotus followed by 5 Coopers, including Rod Jolly back in 7th place on the grid there. Red lights are on, ready to go, and away they go. Wheel smoking start as ever, not a great getaway from Rod Jolly. Frank Sittner though, on the left-hand side, taking the lead from pole position. Dickie Atwood in 2nd, Bill Kirkpatrick in 3rd place. Sweeping through Old Hall and heading to the avenue. Down the hill they go. Sittner from Dickie Atwood. There's the 3rd placed Cooper. Big slide, just as Frank Sittner was talking about, from Kirkpatrick. The Lotus of Chris Smith next up, and then John Harper's red Brabham BT4. And it looks like he's got a good run out of Cascades. Yes, look, he's coming inside Kirkpatrick, squeezes between the Lotus and the Cooper. That big flamboyant slide from the Cooper just cost him time. Kirkpatrick drops from 3rd down to 5th. On board with Dickie Atwood through the first of the chicanes at Fulstons. heading up the hill again, chasing the race-leading Frank Sittner. There's Sid Hall in 14 in 4th place. He's ahead of Alan Bailey. But a battle behind Rod Jolly in number 3, with Brian Jolliffe, 47, trying to squeeze around the outside. And we're right behind that battle with Chris Bullymore. And this will be a real tail-happy fiesta. Little wave of acknowledgement there for the racing room from Rod Jolly as he moves ahead of Brian Jolliffe, and I think he'll stay there now. And that little battle, the 3 Coopers chasing this group just outside the top half dozen. Dab of opposite lock as the treaded narrow rear tyres break loose. Dickie Atwood chasing Frank Sittner, but already the race leader at Lodge and easing away a few tenths at a time. Battle for 5th place behind the Lotus of Chris Smith. Here's Rod Jolly looking down the inside of Alan Bailey's much later Type 71 Cooper. And Jolly squeezes through on the inside. And here's a very rare Lotus 24. Jack Brabham campaigned this in 1962, won at Roskilde in Denmark. On board again with Dickie Atwood. Yellow flags up ahead, so Frank Sittner can't pass the back marker. That's Richard Parnell's Walker Climax, and the yellow car off on the track there. That's why there were the yellow flags. That's David Prattley's Lola Mark III. So now the 2 BT4s right together. Sittner leads into Cascades, and right on his tail, Dickie Atwood. On board again with the BT4. Up towards Island, and Frank going down this queue of traffic on the inside. You'll have to be careful, make sure you've been seen though, Frank. Dickie Atwood has the easier job. Once the leader is in there, everybody will be more aware. Blue flags waving furiously down the inside into the bank corner. Inside Brian Ashby's rare yellow Emeryson, and Sittner leading the way past the Lotus 18 of Mark Griffiths. Down to the chicane, and more slow traffic in front. The 2 BT4s scythe their way through the field. Oh, but Sittner's balked. Jeff Williams went to the inside in the Lola T55. Dickie Atwood on the grass as they go either side of the Lola. And Sittner, despite being balked there by the slower car, actually comes out with a slight advantage. Atwood really losing traction there on the grass. And the tail enders, well, causing a little frisson of excitement there between the 2 lead Brabham drivers. Pouring on the power up Clay Hill, and using the curbs as well, Dickie Atwood, as he chases flat out here. Little lift before getting into the braking area for Druids. John Harper in 3rd. He's just lapped Roger Newman's BT14 from 1965. That's the newest car in the field, in fact. Lap 8, Dickie Atwood still giving chase to race leader Frank Sittner. The 2 identical Brabham BT4s. Braking, changing down into Paulston's apex, now on the gas, hold the slide, take the inside curve and start to accelerate up the hill towards Knickerbrook. And there is Sittner slowing down, hand in the air, the universal sign of a problem with the car. And look on the right-hand side of the picture, his left rear wheel pointing in at the front, which it certainly shouldn't be. He's got a broken suspension linkage there, and that means that the car will be wildly driving itself, and Sittner slowed right down. Smoke 2 from the BT4 of John Harper. Well, he should pick up 2nd place. Here comes Rod Jolly in his Cooper. And another deft little flick of the wrist to control the slide. 7th on the grid after gearbox problems in practice. Well, the smoke, that's oil smoke from John Harper's Brabham, doesn't seem to be slowing him down. And look at that broken suspension member there at the tail of Frank Sittner's car. Bit of metal fatigue and probably a little bit of contact with the curbs there as well. So the leader at Knickerbrook, huge gap back to 2nd place John Harper, so he can now afford to take it easy and avoid using those curbs, particularly bearing in mind the problems that Sittner's had. So here is Harper smoking on the overrun, but not under power, so it shouldn't be doing too much harm to his performance. But Rod Jolly closing in the dying stages from behind. And Neville Hay is with Frank Sittner.
Frank, that looked to me as if it might have been a bit exciting. But actually, it wasn't, because it just came out of the hairpin, and as I went round the hairpin, turned the steering wheel. When I came out of the hairpin, the steering wheel was still there. The car was going straight, so that was just trickle home. The rear wishbone broke.
No problems though for Dickie Atwood, cruising home in the BT4 owned by John Beasley. Down and out of Dearly for the final time. The checkered flag awaits for him to take victory here at Oulton Park, appropriately enough in the Brabham. So a slightly fortuitous but appropriate enough win for Richard Atwood. Down into Lodge, the last lap. Harper still smoking, Jolly still chasing, but I think time has run out for the Cooper driver. No big flamboyant slides here as they follow the Lotus. It will be second place for Brabham and John Harper, and edged out just by the narrowest whisker, Rod Jolly takes a well-deserved third place, leading the little Cooper flotilla. For his efforts, Richard Atwood will be presented with a replica of the original Gold Cup by Jack Brabham. And Black Jack also took time out to reminisce with Neville Hay about racing at Oulton against illustrious names like Sterling Moss and Jimmy Clark.
Well, Jimmy was a fantastic driver. He really was good, and lovely, safe driver to drive with wheel to wheel. Yeah, he never ever put you in a difficult situation or anything like that, and he was very good to drive with.
You had some fair dices with Sterling. I remember him winning a race here with the Ferguson. You presumably were still with Works Cooper at that time. Do you remember anything of that one?
Yeah, that's right. That was another good dice too. Because Sterling was always a very good man to dice with, of course. He was always quick, never had an off day to my knowledge. Yeah, we had a few dust-ups with a lot of people up here actually. Had some marvellous dices, really and truly.
Now, so Jack Brabham's career marked the beginning of the rear-engine-based cars. But of course, before that time, the engines were based in the front. And after the break, we're going to see some of these beasts in action.